The grim economic diagnosis that is called the liquidity trap. We've talked about this for a couple of years now. It's here, not going away anytime soon, and it's worldwide. And this is I don't want to say crisis, but it's something that is concerning. The Japanese have been in this for a long time, and they've yet to find a way out. And we are heading the same way, as I've been telling you for years now. So let's dive into this advisor perspective article. I'll just show you the election from these guys from Northern Trust, election reflections, state and local struggles, and liquidity traps. And I don't frankly care too much about the election stuff. It's fine. One thing I did think was interesting. Right here, I want to bear with me just a second. We had it right here. Government bodies balance their budgets with sweeping layoffs. This was pretty interesting. Look at that. 20 roughly was that almost 20 million employees in state government, and then it fell to less than 18 million. Came back up, and then right here. In 2020, we're down to 18.5 million. So they've shed 1.5 million government employees. 1.5 million divided by 18 million, and that's 8.5% of their payroll, which is crazy. It's only gonna get worse too, by the way, because look, state sales tax collections, April through August is just dead to rights. I mean, all right. So let's keep. As long as the economy remains dislocated by the pandemic, funding of government services will fall short while demand remains elevated. State and local governments could prove to be a significant economic headwind in the year ahead. Get out! Almost lost in all the attention attracted by the U.S. election this week were the three important central bank meetings. The Fed, Bank of England, BOE, and the Reserve Bank of Australia are all facing a similar challenge. Their economies are falling into a liquidity trap, and it's a grim diagnosis. The trap signals a central bank's inability to stimulate demand through conventional tools. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers once described liquidity traps as a black hole of monetary policy. A number of world markets have a combination of low interest, low inflation, weak demand, and a preference for savings over investing. Banks are reluctant to lend into an uncertain credit environment and are being encouraged by regulatory authorities to manage the resources carefully. In fact, banks are not being reluctant to lend. There's no one that wants to borrow the money. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Probably one of my favorite economic books of all time, The Holy Grail of Macroeconomics. I'll put a link in the show notes. Lessons from Japan's Great Recession by Richard Koo. I've studied economics for a long time, and this book, which one of you guys told me about, it changed everything for me. It really is. I picked up one thing here, and I don't know if this will go along with what we're talking about here, but if and when it is accepted by the profession, the synthesis will have major implications for future economic analysis. In particular, the next time a country experiences a recession that proves unresponsive to monetary easing, economists equipped with a balance sheet recession concept will quickly consider the possibility that businesses have shifted from profit maximization to debt minimization. I literally just picked this out, and that's perfect. The first indicator they should look at will be the level of interest rates, including those of government bonds. A low government bond yield, which is what we're dealing with right now across the world, low government bond yield in the face of bankers who are eager to lend. We have many bankers eager to lend. There's just no one there on the other side to borrow. Is a sure sign there will be no private sector borrowers to take up funds left unborrowed by the government if it went ahead with fiscal consolidation. In this situation, not only is fiscal consolidation out of the question, but a large fiscal stimulus may be needed to turn the economy around. I 100% agree. Yeah, he talks all kinds about it. There's just we can therefore see that fiscal policy, not monetary policy, lifted the U.S. and German economies out of the Great Depression of the 1930s. Economists assume that today the contraction of the money supply during the Great Depression were caused by a shortage of funds, and specifically by a lack of liquidity in the banking system. But as I've already seen, only 13% of companies reported problems related to a shortage of funds. And many of these are probably experiencing business difficulties as well. In other words, even if the Fed had supplied massive amounts of liquidity, It is unlikely that many of these firms would have been able to obtain bank loans given their poor profit outlook. The argument passed down from Friedman to Ben Bernanke is that the Great Depression could have been avoided through more skillful administration of monetary policy. But when an economy falls into a balance sheet recession, plunging many borrowers and their lenders into insolvency, only two policy responses would produce results. One is for the government to inject capital into companies and banks and pull them out of their negative equity positions, i.e. nationalization. The other is for the government to place large orders with these same firms to revitalize their cash flow. The point that he's saying is the monetary policy is dead. They have no room to, there's nothing. The Feds cannot, they can keep putting money into the system, but there's no velocity, there's no turnaround. No one wants to borrow. People are paying down debt. No one wants to borrow in times of crisis. And when they don't want to borrow, it doesn't matter what the interest rates are. I say, I don't want the debt on my books, which will happen right now. Let's keep going. All right. Yeah, right here. Under these conditions, the money a central bank injects into the economy does not circulate normally, i.e. velocity of money, and it fails to promote growth. During the last crisis, central bankers were often the only game in town for stimulating economic growth, but they went into the crisis with a lot of room to cut rates, which they do not have now. Central banks are in almost all advanced economies are now below 1%, with some already negative. We think interest rate policy has reached its limit. Many central banks are increasing the size of the balance sheets to flood their systems with cash, liquidity cash, but they may be pushing on a string. Demand for credit is soft. That's the issue. Households around the world have surged in the last 6 months. Household savings has surged in the last 6 months. In the U.S., cash holdings of public companies increased from $1.96 trillion at the end of 2019 to $2.5 trillion in the second quarter of this year. European household deposits increased by over 10.5% over the year to September, the fastest rate in a decade. Europe is closer to the black hole with little prospect of rates return to positive territory. The Eurozone relies heavily on its own banking system for credit extension, but financial companies there are cutting back on lending. Japan is already in the hole and may go deeper. The U.S., with its unprecedented monetary measures and the risk of a divided house in Washington limiting the scope for a sizable fiscal response, may be the next to fall in. Bank lending to households. Look at that. Here's the we care about the U.S. because we're pro-America, baby. And that's us. Bank lending to households, March 19th to September 20. Look at that. Look at this. This is UK. It's freaking negative 8%. They've reduced their lending to households by negative 8% in the last year. Japan in the negative. Eurozone approaching in the negative. Yeah. And the U.S. is approaching negativity. Central bank deposit rates. Oh, look at that. Just across the board. European Central Bank negative. Bank of Japan negative. That is crazy. With credit conditions tight, fiscal policy becomes more important. Liquidity traps risk of setting off a deflationary spiral in which prices fall. Anticipation, right? Anticipation of further price drops cause people to delay spending, leading prices to fall even more. And on top of that, hold on to your cash that you have. Abundant liquidity may trigger excessive risk-taking that leads to financial bubbles, while underperforming firms can continue to roll over their debts. By one estimate, 18% of U.S. corporations would falter if not for the abundance of liquidity in the financial system. I just got to take that with a grain of salt. A global liquidity trap also leads to competitive devaluation of currencies as monetary policies contribute to a weakening of exchange rates. While monetary policy becomes ineffective in liquidity traps, fiscal policy becomes more effective. And the research shows that the multiplier from government spending tends to be larger in prolonged liquidity trap, which is exactly what Richard Koo says. And that's kind of the basis of the modern monetary theory, but which we're already kind of in right now anyway. Expansionary fiscal policies can help in reducing unemployment and thereby reduce the needs for individuals to hoard cash. But the world is already heavily indebted today, and policymakers have become hesitant to add further to their financial burdens. In the end, stimulating growth is critical. Failing to do so could cause economies to fall into a trap that would be difficult to climb out of. All right, so let's go into this right here. Savings is upticking around the world. Remember, these say there's a savings crunch. We're not saving enough. Well, apparently when we do save, they don't like it either. So there are many ways which economy virus is changing our habits, including mine. Even though my finances are reasonably secure, I found myself saving more. But the economist in me recognizes that's a growing problem. Many nations are pumping large amounts of money into their economies through direct cash payments and employment support. The measures are intended to sustain demand, providing a boost to consumer spending that will stop the recession and hasten the recovery. Instead, households have turned cautious. Savings rates around the world are soaring, especially in countries where consumption normally accounts for a large share of the economic output. Good old US of A. Consumer spending accounts for more than 2/3 of the U.S. economy and more than half of the Eurozone. Some of this renewed saving is involuntary, as consumers are unable to maintain their usual consumption patterns amid lockdowns, but much is also rational and deliberate. When income prospects are uncertain, building a safety net is a high priority. In the U.S., gross personal savings rate surged from 7.9% at the start of the year to 33% in April. It remained at an elevated 23% in May. Eurozone savings, defined as the ratio of gross savings to gross disposable income, climbed from 12.7% to 17%, the highest since the birth of the common currency in 1999. It's reached an all-time high, according to the ECB, European Central Bank. In Canada, the savings rate has surged to its highest level since 2001. Economies like Taiwan are witnessing a similar phenomenon. The saving rate in Taiwan is 36%, the highest over 3 decades. The increase in savings suggests that stimulus measures have had a low multiplier effect so far. I.e., when the government's spending money to stimulate you, you're putting it in the bank. I'm telling you, that's another liquidity trap, which would lead to the modern monetary theorists have to say, maybe the fiscal side of it doesn't work either. People just spending it. Which is why they, if you made money, you didn't get the money, the stimulus, which freaking pissed me off because we pay taxes too. Because the idea is if you're making money, you don't spend it as much as someone who's not making money. I mean, there's some legitimacy to that, but it's like, wait a second, man, give the money to everybody, as opposed to just give it to some people. That's not fair. And Trump did that. That ticked me off. This is the reason for there's a recipe for the liquidity trap. When a massive surge in the money supply is met with limited uses for it, household bank deposits from the 4 largest Eurozone economies surged over $1 billion in March and April, 3 times as much as the average pace of growth over the last decade. Several markets are facing the paradox of thrift, a central component of the Keynesian economics. The paradox states that in a recession, individuals try to hoard cash. And he didn't say that, but I'm saying. However, if everyone decides to hoard cash at once, economic activity will contract further, leading to a more anemic economic recovery. The more households hoard, the less likely businesses are to hire more people, blah, blah, blah. Precautionary savings are unusual in times of economic uncertainty, but this time is different. We can see right here, look at this, household gross savings rate, and this is, I guess that's a Eurozone, 17%. Green is US, 13%. Canada, look at that, crazy. I mean, huge increases. That's nuts. Elevated savings will alter the trajectory of the economic recovery. The higher savings rate not only poses a threat to economic recovery, but it also is a challenge for policymakers as they try to gauge the amount of stimulus that would fuel a return to growth. I'm telling you, I'm just telling you right now, what they're going to do is they're going to bring the pain to hoard cash. And what they're going to do is they're going to go to electronic currency. You can see that a mile away. They're going to say, okay, you want to hoard cash. If you have a certain amount of cash in your savings account, we'll give you 90 days to relinquish that to buy this new electronic currency. If you don't do it every month, you don't almost be like a penalty for not enrolling in Medicare. Hold on a second. You can trade your cash dollar for dollar for the next 60 days, 90 days into the federal currency, electronic currency. If you don't, you'll lose 5 cents for every month you delay or something like that. You can see this is going to happen a mile away. And that will get you out of your dollar. They're going to make it pain to hoard cash. And then once you get that currency in the electronic, they can monitor every single thing that you're doing. I mean, they can do that now anyway. But then they're going to do the same thing. Oh, we see you kept too much money in cash. We're going to charge you a negative interest rate where if you have $100,000 in cash, a year from now you have $95,000. A year from now you have $90,000. That's coming. You see that a mile away, man. They want it out of cash and into the economy to increase the velocity of money, which means you're at the whim of the policymakers in the World Economic Forum and all these other globalists. They want the financial ability to dictate how you run your life. And how you run your life is always going to be through money. And if they can control your money by making it harder for you to hold your money, it's scary. Anyway, it's coming. I'd love to hear comments. We'll see you.